I can't believe that you and I have ever or would ever have a conversation about dust, but I have something to contribute on this topic as well, which is I've got in my cottage, I've got this huge cream-coloured tiles is the flooring, I would say a metre each. And the two things that collect on it are the Labrador hair when they come and visit me, and slobber, to be honest. A Labrador slobber and hair.
Welcome to Own It, Your Business and Your Life, with Nicola Cairncross and Judith Morgan. In this podcast, we're going to cover everything you need to embrace to become a successful entrepreneur, marketing, money, and much, much more. How to create a business doing just what you love. How to own it, your business and your life. This one will be fast, funny, feisty, and very lively. So sit back and enjoy the show.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Perfect. Oh. I can hear you. It's all very, very loud and clear.
Marvellous. So tell us about your week, which included your birthday.
Yes, I forgot all about that, to be honest.
So did I until it popped up on Facebook, and I normally remember.
We're very slack with these things, aren't we? But that's fine.
Well, no, I'm not actually, but that's why I'm surprised. That's why I'm remarking upon it. I'm quite good at birthdays.
Oh, well, I had a very nice day. Phoebe and Nelson gave me presents first thing, and I got 2 or 3 lovely presents actually. I got no, you got 2 lovely presents. The Ferrero Rocher are the most disgusting things known to the planet. Well, I absolutely love them. So.
I don't understand why. What's the good news about that is when people give them to me, I'll just save them for you.
Yeah, they'll do that because I absolutely love them. They're my favourites.
Awful.
And the Blue Yeti microphone that I'm talking to you on today, I'm going to have to, keep my voice down because it sounds really, really loud.
It sounds loud where? In your own ears?
Yes, because I've got my microphone plugged into the Blue Yeti because I didn't want double sound effects, when if it was coming out the speaker and things. So
yes, you can't adjust that.
Well, I think I can, yeah. So I've got my headphones plugged into the bottom of the Blue Yeti. The Blue Yeti's plugged into the computer. I've done a sound test. It sounds much, much better. And so I should be nice and clear and loud. So that was lovely. And then I got a Kindle White because Phoebe had heard me complaining that I was getting cramps in my hand when I was reading in bed on my phone.
Okay.
And that was weeks ago, so she picked up on that and remembered it. And then we went out to the big fat Greek restaurant in Worthing, which was actually Greek Cypriot, which is all very different. They didn't understand a word of my carefully cultivated Greek phrases.
Yes.
And everyone turned up for that, except Chloe, who had just finished a week in Spain and had gone on to a week in Ibiza for a wedding. So,
wretched. What a wretched life Chloe is leading. Yes.
So Spencer was there telling us about his job, which, he's travelling all over the world. Nelson and Phoebe were there. Gaga and Eileen were there, which is my stepfather, really, but I think of him as my father. And Heather and Richard were there. So we had a jolly, jolly time. It was very nice. And I got more presents in the form of some cash for Heather. She's very practical.
Yes.
She said, no, really, I couldn't be bothered to go buy yourself something.
Fair enough, yeah. If anything, that might be my favourite present, funnily enough.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah. So you feel like you can spend it in gay abandon.
Gay abandon, yeah.
Exactly. And a very nice bottle of red wine from Spencer, as recommended by Nick, apparently, which is Sarah's ex-husband. He knows what I like.
I also like Nick.
Yes, well, there you go. He's got very good taste in red wines. And what else was there? Some books from Sarah, a couple of really nice books. So I did very well on the birthday haul.
A stash, yes.
Yes, and that was Sunday night we went out. And then I could have sworn I heard Gaga say he had an ear infection, but because I developed one the next day, which has been absolutely agony all week.
Oh, it is.
It's made me rather under the weather.
The only time I've consulted a doctor in the last 64 years was when I had an ear infection. It's so painful.
Yeah, it is. And it's right inside your head, so there's no getting away from it.
And do you know what the other thing is that people can't tell that you're poorly by looking at you when you've got an ear infection.
No.
So actually they're quite hard to bear, other people. I don't know if you've been to a supermarket or anything where there's a background announcements or noise, but that's agony as well.
Yeah. I went to a chemist and she prescribed sort of airdrops things, in a spray.
Yes.
Which is a horrible shock when that goes in. And but I'd had that when I had my glue ear swimming ear, when I came back from Australia.
Yes.
And but this one just got worse and worse. I woke up in the middle of the night the other night and thought, God, I really might have to go do A&E at this rate. But managed, got some more painkillers down my neck and rang the doctor. And anyway, I'll tell you a tiny bit more about that in a minute.
Okay. I'm impressed that you got rid of it in 3 days, though.
Well, yesterday I got the antibiotic spray, and it's already overnight it started making a difference.
Marvellous.
So even though I thought, hang on a minute, it's hurting all down my... He said it's outer ear, and I said, well, I thought to myself, how can it possibly be outer ear if it's hurting down my neck into my jaw and up into my eyeballs? But he was right.
The ear is quite a complicated thing. I don't know what a doctor would regard as an outer ear. It probably means as far as you can access.
Yeah. Anyway, but the spray is making all the difference. I'm much better today. I couldn't even eat last night because my jaw was so painful. Yeah, so that's never good. And then what else have I done?
I think also in.
Go on.
Sorry, I think we've got a delay again. I think inner ear affects your balance, so that's probably the distinction he was trying to make. Because then, if it's an inner ear infection, you can fall over.
Yeah, he made me stand up, and I could stand up okay. Yeah. So that was all right. Yeah.
There you go.
Yes, yeah. And so I've chose a developer this week for my Stupa Life project, and he's cracked on at a tremendous rate. And so I'll talk a bit more about that later on. And how did I choose him? I chose him because he was A, the cheapest, and B, asked the best questions, and came back to me the quickest. So hungriest and least expensive. And then I did all my own, in spite of the year, I've done all my own marketing and a couple of Facebook Lives this week, although not daily because I did fall off towards the end of the pain episodes.
Yeah.
But no, it's been a good week. How about you? Well,
I was worried last night because I didn't think I had anything to discuss with you at all. So my news is a little thin on the ground. As you know, as a sort of career Londoner, I don't really know anything about the British countryside at all, except how nice it is when the sun is shining. But I'm living in this cottage in the country, which has a duck pond outside. And so ever since I got here, which is about a month ago, I've been enjoying geese and moorhens. But this week we have a duck and a drake. A mummy and a daddy, and I don't know, my lack of knowledge about the countryside, I don't know whether they've been here all along and I didn't notice. I don't think that's the case because they like to be outside the pond and lurk around on the platform, and I think I would have noticed that. And also I don't know whether they're returners, i.e. they come back here every year. They're probably en route somewhere, aren't they? Well, I don't know. They do migrate, ducks. Well, they quite like it here. They've been here for several days already, I think. Building up their strength and getting jiggy with it, Judith. Well, I don't know whether they're going anywhere from here. I mean, I think England is a good place for ducks and drakes, isn't it? I don't know. You'd have to Google it. Well, we know nothing. You see, there we go. Between us, what we know about ducks is they're very limited, unless it's on our plate. And you can tell by my tone of voice, I'm even less interested. No, really. No, can't even feign interest. No, I would say they're very pretty. Well, certainly he is. Yes. Well, it's always the man of the species, isn't he, that gets all the good gear. Often in nature. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what else has happened this week? The end of the months, I've done my month-end accounts, which I relish, as you know. It's like being the old me for a bit. In fact, because the 30th was Monday, I started doing it on Friday. I don't know why, really. I just couldn't wait, which is a bit tragic. And yesterday I had to negotiate the first hurdle when I'm living in any new place, which has had to go to the local hairdresser. So I had an outing. I said to the lady who lives in the big house, where'd you get your hair done? And she said, I'll have it done in South Africa, because she goes there. Well, she goes there quite often. Right. She's got a house there. So I said, well, that's no good to me, is it? So I found a place that was called New You, but not spelt like that.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I'm a bit like I am on X Factor, snobbish when they can't spell their own name. So I was a bit iffy about it. But actually, I had a marvellous experience. I got a great haircut, and it cost me £17. I mean, honestly,
Marvellous.
out here in the wilds, I don't know whether they look at me and give me OA pensioners rate or whatever it is, but they do these marvellous haircuts for free.
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. Because you pay sort of £48.50 in London for that.
I know, but
minimum.
And then you have to sit there for an hour while they make it justify their prices and flick you about a bit.
Well, I really liked the woman and I liked the haircut. And if I'm still here in 6 weeks, I'll go back. Can't say fairer than that, can you?
No, absolutely not.
No.
It's something we discuss on a regular basis, which is, and I've been talking to Phoebe a lot about it this week, is busting tolerations. So I've been clearing out, because what Irving did was he took everything he needed and he just left everything else. And there was quite a lot of it. So we've been basically clearing out the bedroom, getting rid of all the extraneous furniture, quite a lot of which has gone into Phoebe's room because she's got quite a lot of clothes that need organising. And she said, and also I've been doing things like I defrosted a couple of freezers and, all that kind of thing. And she said to me the other day, why? And she's on a 3-day clear-up bender. We went to Dunelm Mill and got some more storage units and everything. And she said, I feel so good. She said, I can't believe it. Since you've been back, everything's been cleared out. And Nelson's watching it all in wide-eyed amazement. It hasn't infected him yet, but it's only a matter of time. And she said, why does it make us feel so good? And I said, well, because what you're doing is you're busting a toleration, something that takes your energy every time you look at it, every time you feel overwhelmed by it, every time you get annoyed by something. And I said, I am a lazy bitch, really, but I have a very low toleration threshold. So I'll tolerate things for a little while, and then it's like a dam bursts and I have to do something, hence defrosting the freezer at midnight the other night. I said, so, you're probably the same. It's just that, when you're surrounded by people who aren't taking any notice of things and who aren't making things better, like, we couldn't dust the hearth and the fireplace because there were so many tiny shells all over it. And I said, well, what should we do with these shells then? Because we can't dust. And I can't sit there looking at the dust any longer. And she said, well, we could put them in a jug. So we put all the tiny shells in a jug, and they're still there should Irving want to come and collect them, which he won't. But we're able to now dust and then sit and look at the telly without having to look at dust balls rolling across the hearth. So It's just all tiny things like that. And I said it just really liberates you because you take the time to sort the toleration, and then that frees up all this mental energy that every time you looked at the hearth was taking up a little bit of your mental energy. So you've got all that mental energy for other things now.
Yes.
And it was quite interesting sort of explaining the whole process and why it made you feel so much better, or why it made us feel so much better.
Yes.
Nelson's feeling much better because we're not so grumpy.
Yes.
So it's working for him too, but he's gone off to Leeds. So, busting tolerations has fueled my fire this week. It's an oldie but a goodie.
I can't believe that you and I have ever or would ever have a conversation about dust, but I have something to contribute on this topic as well, which is in my cottage, I've got this huge cream-coloured tiles is the flooring, I would say a metre each. And the two things that collect on it are the Labrador hair when they come and visit me, and slobber, to be honest. Labrador slobber and hair. And dust bunnies from using the tumble dryer in the big house when I do my washing, which isn't something I normally do. Normally, I live in a place where I hang up my clothes and I let them air dry, but that doesn't work here for various reasons, which I won't go into. And so lots of dust, fur, cat and dog hair and dust is collecting on my floor. And the cleaner in the big house came to visit me once, but only once in that month. So the place is getting a little bit slummy. So I'm going to have to look for a solution for this. And it isn't that I'm surrounded by stuff. It's that I'm amazed by dust. I'm slightly amazed by not sort of dust, but stuff that falls. And they've got these beautiful, beautiful black marble kitchen worktops. Well, it's like a magnet for stuff that's in the air that lands. I don't even want to call it dust, but it's weird. So noticed yesterday they transformed the kitchen in the big house. I said to the little girl over there, what did you use? She said, well, I only used water today, but weird. So
they must have to clean the worktops on a regular basis.
Well, I think, depends how I don't even want to say OCD, picky you are, because, a black worktop, I think, is quite unforgiving because, one tiny spillage or fingerprint. And anyway, a few days, you can see it. You can run your hand along and go, "Ooh, look at the muck in here." Cliche. But anyway, there we were talking about dust. I will tell you now what has fueled my fire.
Go on then.
I'm a professional conversationalist. I talk to people for a living, but just like everyone else, you, me, my clients, I don't always find it easy to have those conversations in my personal life. And not having seen my brother since the end of May, when it was my nephew's 30th birthday, and knowing that he's in a little bit of a sulk about that, we've emailed a few times, but we've not spoken. And you have to, you never know these days when you call somebody for a chat, whether it's going to be a convenient time or not. And I knew that they were flying, I thought, on Monday to Japan for 2 weeks. As it transpired, it was Sunday, but Sunday night. So I phoned on Sunday and it went to voicemail. And I thought, oh, they'll be at the airport. I've got this wrong. And then he phoned me back in from his car to say that he was on the golf course, so he couldn't answer the phone. And we had a very nice chat. And they've flown on Monday to Hong Kong, where their first 2 children were born, and then they've gone on to Japan for the Rugby World Cup, and their third and final child was born in Japan. So they've gone on they're going back stomping on over their old stomping grounds. I mean, they've been to both of those places plenty of times since they lived there, but it's basically a rugby-based trip. But they are going to, when they lived in a place in Tokyo called Sangabashi, their favourite local restaurant was, wait for this, Spanish.
What?
And the proprietor, you'll love this, was called Francisco, i.e. a Spanish name, Watanabe, a Japanese name.
Yes.
And a bit like the story you said when you went into your restaurant and tried to speak Greek, my sister-in-law and my brother actually 20 years ago learned a bit of Japanese when they were staying there. So my sister-in-law polished up. My brother said, should we go back to, I can't remember what it was called, this restaurant. Anyway, should we go back there? Yes. And Anne then brushed up a few Japanese sentences and phoned Japan to see if she could get a booking, to discover that, unfortunately, Francisco had died a few years ago, but it was still in the family. And they're really looking forward to going back to their old Spanish restaurant in Japan after 20 years, which is a lovely sort of cultural mix. And then on Monday, I got the opportunity to talk to the lady who owns my current home up the big house, because she was having a day off for work. And I just thought afterwards that when conversations go well, people are in the mood and they've got time to talk to you, or they need to talk to you, because my hostess was a little bit tearful and having a day home from work to sort of, regroup. When it goes well, they are air clearing, mutually supportive, transformative. I was quite G'd up by both of these conversations, and all I'd really had was a conversation with human beings that I care about that had gone well.
Yes.
And you can't guarantee that, can you? Because quite frankly, often we might approach somebody we love for an air clearing conversation. It goes badly, and then you're all in a sulk and miserable about it. So that's what's fueled my fire this week.
Yes. This is an interesting fact, but my doppelganger in Second Life, it was Hermione Watanabe.
Oh, yes, that's right, yes.
There you go. Tenuous connection at best.
Yes.
But no, you're right about the conversations. It's like, no, just going out for dinner. I mean, I didn't actually get to talk to Richard or Spencer because they were at the other end of the table. But just the fact that they came and that we had dinner and it was my birthday and I clapped eyes on them, gave them a big hug, sort of made me feel reconnected to them again.
I think actually that with a party, like at my nephew's party and with your party on Sunday, there's a little bit of alcohol to grease the wheels. But if you call people in daylight hours and nobody's had a drink yet, in my family, it doesn't necessarily mean that things will go easily or well.
No, the goal now to ring people who like a drink is between 7 and 9
of an evening before they get past it. You mean? Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and then another thing, of course, my brother's rugby team had won 2 weeks running, so he was all news was good, and that meant he was in a mood, in a good mood, which
a
was
jovial, bon ami kind of mood.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, good. So tell us about Focus of the Week then.
Right. So I listened to this again last night because we recorded in July and it's easy to forget
yes.
what happens. It's a corker. This is a corker. And our guest this week, listener guest, is Sue Ritchie. She's a women's leadership coach. And you, unfortunately, didn't get much of a word in this because she talked about herself. She was so fired up And it was on a topic that was very close to my heart as well. She says when she talks on Facebook or anywhere, networking about women's leadership or equal rights or women's issues, somebody will always ask her, what about men? So the topic of her talk is whataboutery. What about men? And she describes herself as normally mild-mannered, but she was absolutely fizzing in this conversation. She brought up her son as a single parent mother for 12 years. And we talk in the conversation about how that shaped him to be, somebody who's in favour of, just naturally assumed men and women were equal. Susan Ritchie, Susan, and I'll link in the show notes to susanritchie.co.uk and Susan J. Ritchie on Twitter. So morning, Sue, how are you?
I'm very well. Good morning to you both.
Good. So welcome to Sue Ritchie, who I know quite well because we've been working on and off together for, 5 or 6 years, haven't we?
We have. Yeah.
And Sue is an impressive, properly published author, at least twice over, and contemplating writing a third, I think.
Yes,
and you're a local radio celeb too, aren't you?
Yes. I've appeared a lot on my local BBC Radio Lincolnshire station.
Okay.
Although not so much over the last year, but there was at one point I was on practically weekly, which was lovely.
Very good. Now, what we'd like you to do is to introduce yourself to the listeners and to Nicola, and then when you've finished that, move straight on into your topic, intriguingly entitled Whataboutery.
Whataboutery. Okay, right. So as Judith has very nicely introduced me, my name is Susan Ritchie, and I am a leadership coach, workshop leader, trainer, and author. I specialise in leadership presence and personal impact, with a particular interest in emerging female leaders. And I've been in business now for around 8 years, and my particular interest in this field has grown over the last 4 to 5 years. I'm the author of 2 books, Strategies for Being Brilliant, 21 Ways to Be Happy, Confident and Successful, which was released in 2013. And then my second book, which was released in January this year, Strategies for Being Visible, 14 profile-raising ideas for emerging female leaders. And that is kind of the area that I want to base this interview on today. And as you said, Judith, the title of this is Whataboutery. And whataboutery refers to a phrase that's used to put down and to stifle debate by a person who is generally opposed to the subject of the conversation. I came across it last year through the work of a lovely woman that I follow on Twitter called Dr. Jessica Eaton, in one of her blog posts called Stop Asking Me What About Men? And it's particularly associated with women's issues, the drive for equality, equal rights, inclusivity. But I've come across it recently as well with things like Pride Week. What about straight people? Can't we have Straight Week? And then Black History Month. Or can't we have White History Month? And for Pride Week, there was a wonderful comment I read, and it said having a straight week would be like opening a soup kitchen for millionaires, which I just thought was absolutely wonderful. And it kind of summed up the massive issue with whataboutery. When it comes to women's issues, which is what I'm particularly interested in, you start a conversation, and you see it a lot in International Women's Day. You start a conversation about women's rights, equality in the workplace, the drive for more women's leaders, and very quickly the conversation becomes dominated. Well, what about men? What about men's rights? What about men in leadership? And it does not add to the debate at all. And I remember being interviewed a couple of years ago on BBC Radio Lincolnshire, and Nicola, the journalist who was interviewing me, said, if there's one thing, Sue, that you could change about this whole debate about women, what would it be? And I said to her that I would get rid of the hostility around the subject. And I believe it's directly tied into this idea of whataboutery. It shuts down, it shuts down conversation. It shuts down discussion, sensible discussion about it. It ignores the facts. And the facts are out there is that we need more women in senior leadership roles. We also need more women in the pipeline that can make choices about what they want to do with their careers. You know, not every woman wants to be a senior exec in a FTSE 100 company. Many women would like leadership positions on a much smaller scale, and that's fine. But while I believe it's going to be very difficult to do that, if every time the subject of what's preventing women in moving into more senior leadership roles is shut down by, well, what about men? And it frustrates me. I am an ex-primary school teacher, quite a mild-mannered woman, but this has me fizzing, absolutely fizzing with fury and just the sheer bloody-mindedness of it, of people who can't see past the end of their nose. And I believe it's no good for business, you know, and this is the real, I know this is a business-based podcast. You follow it through to its logical conclusion. There's tons of research out there which categorically prove that businesses with women holding equal amounts of leadership positions with men are better for the business, they're better for the UK economy, and they're better for the global economy. Everybody wins when women are in more leadership positions. So I would like to take this whataboutery and scrunch it up, set fire to it, and never ever see or hear it again, because I think it's completely divisive and ultimately hugely damaging for everybody concerned.
I can remember the first time. I can remember the first time it happened to you. Can you?
No, remind me. Go on.
I can't remember the specifics, but I think it might have been some sort of networking meeting where you'd started to advance your, you know, female agenda, and some piped up, didn't he, and said, "But what about men?" And then it happened to me on Facebook recently when I was, you know, spouting forth. You know, I mean, it's not my main thing, but I am a big fan of women. Obviously, I was spouting forth on this topic, and some bloke came in and pissed on my parade. Excuse me. I just banned him in the end, because there's no answer to that, is there? There's no answer to that. Do you know, I laughed just now when you were talking, because what about men? I love men with every fibre of my being, but do you know what was in my head? I couldn't give a shit about them in that context. I was so angry, like you. I was fizzing with it. And do you remember that story about the Christmas where the grandfather said to me, "Don't you think Me Too's gone on for too long?" And I said, "What, 5 weeks after 2,000 years only?" And he shut up, because once they get it in context, if they actually like and love the women in their family, which includes daughters and sisters and cousins and nieces and all of that, you know, my brother's a bit like this. And actually what I want him to do is not look at the big picture, but think of his sister and his daughter and his wife and his mother, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry.
No, I don't blame you at all.
You fizzed me.
Yeah, good. I'm glad I fizzed you. I think it needs more people to be fizzed about it. You're quite right. And, you know, one thing I do hope happens is that all of these men in senior roles are thinking about their granddaughters coming into the workplace behind them, and thinking, actually, what is the workplace going to be like for my granddaughter? You know, what about her? And in the Jessica Eaton's blog post, where she speaks wonderfully about this, she speaks about she set up a foundation solely to work with male mental health, and she said when she writes about that, she's lauded as a hero. But the minute, because the other side of what she talks about is victim blaming and sexual violence towards women, and she said the minute she starts talking about that, she gets the most horrendous online abuse. And this is what about women?
So what's the not so secret agenda? What are they frightened of? They're frightened of us, are they? What is it?
I think they're frightened of losing their power, of sharing what they've got. It feels threatening, doesn't it? And I read an article, and it said, I think I have to paraphrase it because I can't remember the actual quote. It said, you know, when you've been privileged enough to have everything, the thought of equality feels like you're being robbed of something.
Like you're losing half.
That you're losing, that you're having everything taken away from you, but you're not.
Isn't that the lesson we're supposed to learn as children, where you're both fighting over the same toy? And
you would hope so.
And your mum teaches you that you can share it, and it's all right.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. But, you know, it's a tough lesson. I think it's a tough lesson in the learning for lots of us. And to be fair, not just men. I think, you know, sadly, I do see women out there with holding on to this attitude and these beliefs as well.
Yeah, I agree.
And, you know, and I think from a business perspective, it's it's not helpful, and it shuts down women's voices. I used to go to lots of networking meetings. I don't go to so many anymore. And I can remember being in rooms of that were dominated by men in grey suits. And I've been at conferences where the only people asking questions are men. Women hardly ever stick their hands up. I went to a conference a few years ago, and I counted the images of women on the PowerPoint slides, and there were 3 of them, and they were all shown shopping. And it was at a business conference, but they were shown shopping. Yeah. So we've got a long way to go to get women's voices.
What frightened to me was when you talked about granddaughters. Is that because you think it's going to take 2 generations, not 1?
The research shows it not in our lifetime, Judith, unfortunately, God. Which is quite horrific. Quite horrific. It's not in our lifetime anytime soon.
So what can we do? I mean, I know you're doing a lot, but do you despair ever?
I don't despair. I get a little discouraged sometimes. I'm married to a lovely man, and he's one of the good ones. But we were watching TV the other night, and we like watching those quiz shows that are full of male comedians with the occasional woman on. And Janet Street Porter was on it, and she interrupted one of the men, and he was instantly, look at her, she's talking over him. Oh, and I looked at him, and I just thought, you've completely ignored the fact that these shows are built on and encourage men to do just that. And he doesn't comment on that at all. It's the one woman that he notices doing it. And I thought, to me, that's a really interesting example of somebody holding an unconscious bias and deliberately looking for a fault in the argument. And I thought, somebody as nice as my husband can come out with, excuse my French, but crap like that.
It's just 50 years of programming, though, isn't it?
It is 50 years. And when I point it out to him, he does realise. And the subject of one of your other podcasts a few weeks ago about the mental load.
Yes.
He did. I showed him an article about that, and he got it instantly. And started ringing the utility companies and stuff himself. So I don't think it's lost. I just think we need to talk about it more. And I think we need to become immune to the whataboutery if we can't shut it up. And to go back to Jessica Eaton, what she says in her article is, she said, I make it clear that I'm choosing to speak about women. It's not that I don't care about men or I'm not concerned about men. I am choosing on this occasion to talk about women. Yeah. And I hold that in my head now, because every now and then, and my second book is very clearly targeted at women. And I've not had much whataboutery about it, to be honest, apart from one bloke on Facebook who, what about men? And my answer to that now is, what about them? Actually, I'm choosing on this occasion to talk about women. There are plenty of books out there which are aimed at men in leadership. In fact, if you Google leadership, the majority of the images you'll find will be middle-aged white men, because let's face it, they run the world at the moment, don't they, unfortunately? And we need to see a much more diverse range of people in those leadership positions, not just women.
Have you got a good example? Do you know an employer where women are playing an almost or equal role? I think I remember discussing with you once before. I see it sometimes in supermarkets that because the majority of the staff are women, or a lot of the staff are women, they do seem to rise up the ranks to, the sort of level of management role, leadership role that you were describing earlier on, which is not everybody wants to be in the boardroom, but you That's can right. rise up through the ranks at Sainsbury's and things like that. You see it, don't you, in shops?
You do see it. I do think they're few and far between, though. And I'm doing some work locally here in Lincoln with a national, county-wide. In my case, I'm working with retail chain, and I'm working with their emerging leaders, their potential retail managers, and there's more women in the group than there are men at the moment. I think the interesting thing to look at is then to go on to look at very senior leadership roles.
Yes.
So, for example, when I was in teaching, when I was a primary school teacher, it is a profession very, very female dominated. But when you get to more senior levels, it narrows down, and that there are still more men in those roles. And there's lots of contributing factors, Judith. It could be that not everyone wants to do it. Maternity leave, and coming back after having a child, that is still fraught with inequality.
Remember, we're never going to get this until we can do job sharing, and because in leadership it implies long hours and sacrifice, and women very sensibly choose not to do that.
That's right. And I think you've got to have support around you, Nicola, as well. I mean, I was talking to a very good friend of mine who's a CEO. I was talking to her yesterday, and she's a CEO of a massive housing association here in the UK. And she said to me, I go away for 2 days on a conference. She said, but I make sure all the dinners are in the freezer before I go. She said, and then I get back. She said, I walk through the door and my children say, what's for dinner, Mum? And it's like Dad doesn't exist. And I think we've got a battle to change that. I think paternity leave has got to be more widely taken up. And I hate to say it, but I do sometimes believe that when men start feeling penalised in the workplace for leaving early to pick the kids up or having to go take a child to a dentist's, when childcare issues and family demands, because it's not only childcare, is it? It's elderly parents often now at the other end of the spectrum. When those sorts of things start making demands on men in the workplace, I suspect things may change pretty quickly then. It's because they are historically associated with women's work or women's domain. And we accept it, don't we? I'm, pretty strong feminist myself, but I have to say there's still a lot of stuff here in this house that I just take on and do without thinking about it. And this is the thing, I think it's waking up and paying attention to who does what in the household and the way you speak to your children, so that you're bringing up the next generation of people, hopefully, without some of these more toxic views and entrenched attitudes towards who should do what, and hopefully we can move towards a more equal society.
And I can see that you've done that with your son, but you were largely a single parent, weren't you?
I was. I was on my own with Josh, my son, for 12 years until I met Nick, who I'm now married to. And I honestly, I will say this to anybody, and I say it to Nick as well, I believe my son is the young man he is in part because he spent the first 12 years of his life on his own with me, surrounded by strong women. And that gave him all manner of skills. It gave him a confidence. He's eloquent. He's hugely emotionally intelligent. He's charming. He can listen. He can have conversations. And then when I got married to Nick, when we've got two boys, they were, I think, about 15. That added another dimension into his life. But in those formative years,
he didn't have it.
No, he had.
And he's the better for it, isn't he?
Oh, he is. He absolutely is.
Yes. And does that make him a better boyfriend? Because I know he lives with a bird, doesn't he?
He does. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's a really, really nice guy. He's loved everywhere we go. We've just been down to a family party last weekend. One of my brother-in-laws was 60, and all my husband's side of the family, who didn't know Josh before he was 12, just love him. They've adopted him.
Now, I've got some fun questions that we could end with here.
I've
seen a couple of examples recently that I'm going to send you, where men have seen problems that women have and have translated them into how it would feel to be a man in that situation. There was a very good example on Twitter this week. But in the Me Too thing, I remember there's a very simple one, which is my brother said, I don't really understand what we can do anymore. I said, if you were in a male prison, you wouldn't want a man doing it to you. That's your answer. But here we go. Let's go back to whataboutery. What should we say? You said something brilliant. When somebody says, what about anything, straight week, gay week, men, whatever, you say, what about it? And let them solve their own, answer their own questions. It's like you couldn't give us stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. What about them?
Yeah.
And then at this moment, I'm choosing to talk about this.
Yeah.
Start your own conversation.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that would be my answer to anything actually on a Facebook timeline or something. Would be, if you want to talk about this, go and start your own thread about it. But this is what I'm choosing to talk about on my timeline. So.
Do you get exhausted by your work sometimes being a battle in that way?
Yeah, I do, in the sense that when I tell people what I do, people either get it, which is great, or they go into this, oh, for goodness sake, we don't need this. There is equality. What are you talking about? And I find that just quite exhausting, quite demoralising. And where have you been for the last few hundred years?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yes.
You see, the thing is, you're talking to two self-employed people who've always run their own world. And so our experience of life is quite different.
Yes.
And actually, when I sold my accounting business and then started coaching and then started going to network, it's like, oh my God, nothing's changed out here in the 20 years I've been self-employed. I was quite shocked by it.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I do some work for the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and they've got a women's development program, as have a lot of these, big traditional institutions,
Yes.
and the stuff that some of the women talk about. And the issues they bring to the days I do with them are quite phenomenal. And you do think, what on earth?
Yeah.
Do
they have those departments because they're legally required to, or do they genuinely want to promote women's equality?
The Institute of Chartered Accountants genuinely wants to provide resources and support for women, and they cater for women who are employed in other people's organisations, but also who run their own businesses as well.
Because actually accountancy is something that can be done really easily part-time, and actually women are rather good at it.
That's right. But one of the women I interviewed from the second book, she talked about being in a conference. I think she was in financial services, and she was at a conference, and she said, I looked up and it was just a sea of men in grey suits. And I was, apart from the waitress pouring the drinks, I was the only other woman in the room. I don't think it wasn't financial services, it was a similar thing. And you just think, we've still got a long way to go.
And does that for you, does that make it very worthwhile work?
It does. It really does, because I focus my work by and large at women in the early stages of their career, and I think if women can go into the workplace with some of the tools they need to be able to speak out, to raise their profile and not be afraid to do it. And the book came out of work I've been doing over the last 3 or 4 years with clients. I didn't just make it up. It was based on a series of conversations that always had the same thing. Then it gives women a choice.
Yes.
They can take their careers to wherever they want to, but they have that choice. I do also work with men. I have to say, Judith, I'm not, I do mixed workshops and training in organisations, and I do work with men as well. And I tend to work with men who perhaps are slightly more emotionally intelligent and kind of come to me with the same issues that a woman might have.
I'm glad you've said that.
Yeah,
because
but
actually, I think the male own it listener is in that camp.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know if you saw it, I put a lovely snippet of a testimonial I was given on LinkedIn earlier this week and that was from a man. I've worked with him for 6 months, and he's over the moon. It's given him the impetus and the
you see, that is something I believe, but it doesn't behove us to believe it in the context of this discussion, because if people are going, what about men? But actually, in this example, we don't want to be. What about men? What about straight people? What about white people? What about them? They're all right, Jack, in the main. Now, we know they're not perfect, and we know they need help from people like us as well. But what about them?
Exactly.
I love it. I'm going to start practicing this. I can't wait for an opportunity when somebody says, what about X, Y, and Z? Instead of me going, I couldn't give a shit about it, I'm going to say, what about it? Yes.
What is it about them?
You put the problem straight back to the person who brought it into the room.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And the thing about the Pride Week, it's like opening a soup kitchen for millionaires, and that just summed it up for me.
Yes.
you know.
And I see that's the thing about white male privilege as well. They just don't know how lucky they are. Now, we can't talk till Christmas, sadly, although clearly we could, as you can see. You've brought so much fodder.
I haven't got a word in edgeways.
Yeah, no, would you like to get a word in now? Because we've got 3 minutes,
No,
Nicola.
I've got too much to say on the subject. We'll have to
well, there you go. We'll have to have Sue back. We'll have to have Sue back. You see, that's why they have you on the radio, Sue, because you're a repeat guest. Okay.
Yes.
Now, I love you and leave you. Thank you so much for being sort of not you, as you rightly said. You are a mild-mannered woman, but you got the feist up. Yeah,
that's right. Yes.
Where do you want people to come and find you, Sue?
Yes.
Oh, you can find me at susanritchie.co.uk, and that's RITCHIE. That's my website. It's got lots of loads of articles and stuff. I'm also on Twitter a lot at Susan J Ritchie, and if anybody would love to connect with me over on LinkedIn as well, please go and find me there. Yeah, that would be lovely.
Marvellous. Thank you so much for being here.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, the pair of you. It's been lovely.
Okay. Bye, darling.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
No, it was a great conversation. The reason I didn't get a word in edgeways because I was so absolutely gripped by what she was saying.
Well, and also the energy.
Yeah,
and the energy with which she says it. So what the brilliant thing is for you and me and all the listeners is when somebody says, what about, the other party, we just go, what about them? It's like we don't have to take on that issue when we're trying to sort another one. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Good.
Yeah.
No, it's great.
Good. Now tell me your word of the week.
NHS, because they were absolutely brilliant. I rang up the surgery and it was, I'd already got an appointment for next week just to go over some routine stuff. But I rang up on yesterday morning and when I couldn't bear it any longer. And I said, do you have any appointments today? And they said, no, but we've got this Miami clinic. And I was immediately drawn to that, which means something medical, something or other. It means small instance, basically. So they've got this overflow clinic you can go to, and Phoebe drove me up to that, and there was a chemist right next door. So I walked out with my prescription for my eardrops, walked next door, got them filled, got in the car and went home. And I thought, oh my God, that was fantastic service. Now, interestingly, I could have gone in Greece to somewhere.
Yeah, I was going to say, you used to talk very highly of the similar arrangements in Greece.
Yes, but it would have cost me €40 to see the doctor, and then I would have gone off to the chemist, and that would have been another €10. So, funnily enough, going to see specialists and things is very cheap in Greece, but this would have been a lot more expensive, but I still would have got immediate service. So, I was just very grateful about how everyone, slags off the NHS and local surgeries and things, but actually on this occasion I was seen very quickly and very nicely by a lovely doctor who, I didn't care which doctor I saw, but he was lovely.
I think when it works, it is a thing that's easy to be grateful for.
Yeah.
By the way, a bit like the Whataboutery thing, really interesting information came to me this week about Greece, which I'm going to PM you because I don't think the listener is quite as interested in it as you and I. But you'll be amazed to see what I've discovered about Greece this week.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll look forward to that.
Yeah,
good.
So my word of the week is incentive. Like a sales incentive loyalty scheme, and I'm going to explain this more in Who or What's Impressed, because it hasn't impressed me, unfortunately. It's the first time in 244 episodes that when we get to Who or What's Impressed, I'm going to say this is the opposite of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, bit of a bummer there.
Yes. Project updates. I imagine you don't have any.
No, I don't know.
Oh. Luckily, I have several.
Oh, good.
Okay, so interestingly enough, I've got my Facebook ads account back. I don't know if you knew that, but and I've got it up and running again. And I'm starting Clicks and Leads Academy. This is the one that's really challenged me on how to get a funnel going. So I think I've got it now. I think basically I can advertise my book, Attract 3.0, and I'm getting opt-ins for that for £2.50 each, which is really very reasonable for a lead. And then I'm sending them straight to a thing, where it says, okay, well, you've registered for that. When you go to your email, it'll be there. In the meantime, the best way to, work through the book is to do it as part of my 21-day challenge. And so then I jump straight to the challenge, and I've created a page for that on ClickFunnels. And I'm charging £10 a pop for the challenge now. And this time round, I've got something like a 50% take up. So 50% of the people who hit the page for the challenge have signed up for it and paid £10. So I'm giving away the book, but I'm also I'm charging for the challenge, and I'm going to run a challenge every month now. I've decided, so it's just completely ongoing. So I can run the ads continuously. So it's an evergreen campaign, which is really great. And all I've got to do is rotate the interest groups at the beginning to see who gives me the least expensive leads that then convert to the challenge.
But the £10 a pop are paying for the leads, aren't they?
Yeah, well, that's the goal, is to get the front end paying for your traffic, in which case you can scale up your traffic indefinitely, and that's the holy grail, really. But I wanted to update the listeners because I had a really interesting conversation with someone who said they didn't sign up for as a client because they'd heard me talking about how my Facebook ads account had got shut down.
Yes.
And what I wanted to do was just to remind everybody that just because you come across these massive challenges, and some weeks on this podcast, it sounds like I've got insurmountable challenges that are bringing my business to a grinding halt. But actually, I never give up. I never give up. So I got my account back. I would have found another way to get another account if I hadn't. And I've got my leads rolling again and everything. I've worked out a new funnel. So that's that. Only the podcast is at 121,432 downloads. So we're up another 1,000 on last week. And that's good because we are nearly at the point where we've recovered what we were dipped over August, which is very cool. So that was a fast recovery on that one. Stupa Life is my biggest project of the week. I've chosen a developer because I downloaded this software, which I'm going to talk a bit about in the next section, but installed it all and then swiftly realised it was way beyond my capabilities to puzzle it out, even watching the YouTube videos. So I then went looking for a developer online. I found one and put him to work, and within 3 days he's got the whole thing up and pretty much nearly set up. If you go to stupalife.com, you'll find a geo-targeted website where people can add listings for free and then upgrade for a tiny amount to add external links to, say, their website or Airbnb or booking.com. So it's proof of concept within 2 weeks. We haven't made it look fancy yet. We haven't concentrated, we've just got it functional to see so that I can announce it this week. So I only allow adverts on Stupa Life group on Facebook at the weekends, and I stick to that myself. So I wanted to get it live by this weekend, but that's not bad, is it? 2 weeks from idea to the point where you can actually get people putting their credit card in and giving you money. I
think for you it needs to be that. I think for you it needs to be that fast, otherwise you can lose interest.
Oh, definitely, yes. I mean, it's been a bit of a slog the last couple of days because I've been wrangling with Google Cloud Console, and for some reason I find the whole Google thing. I mean, I can do AdWords and everything, but the whole analytics and Cloud Console and APIs and all that really, really technical stuff, I find it very difficult to grasp. So luckily the developer's on it, although he did make an appointment for 9 o'clock this morning, and then as I turned up for him to talk me through something, he buggered off for lunch and left me a few instructions that didn't really quite cut it. So I said to him, that's not very helpful, is it, making an appointment and then going to lunch? But it seems like it's interesting, developers. They seem to be very, very linear indeed. They don't seem to be able to puzzle out what the problem might be. They seem to just issue instructions, and if the instructions don't work, they sort of seem to not be able to think any further than that. So anyway, I have been troubleshooting around the console, and I think I might have got it now. But I am pleased that it's, my investor's pleased as well, because, that's amazing. He works in real world businesses, and he can't quite believe that in 2 weeks you can have them go from idea to proof of concept.
And so
that's really good.
I haven't understood what stupalife.com does then.
Okay, well, stupalife.com started as a Facebook group, which is extremely active and adding lots of people every week. And then the Thomas Cook fiasco happened a week ago last Monday. And I got several messages from people saying, is there anything you can do to help the people here who own accommodation? Because they are now not going to get their money from Thomas Cook for the last 3 months, and they've got empty bookings for next year. And the problem with Stupa is there's no one central place to go to book, because only certain people are on booking.com, certain people are on airbnb.com, because those things take a big chunk out of your money.
Yeah.
And a lot of people got quite lazy who own accommodation in Stupa, and they relied on these tour companies coming in and buying up all the accommodation.
Yeah.
But now they've, not got any bookings for next year because Thomas Cook had earmarked them all, and they might have a website, but they're not very good at SEO. They're not very good at social media. It's all done in English, not Greek,
Yeah.
So what I've done is I've created a central database of accommodation, shops, bars, tavernas, restaurants,
Okay.
places, so it's a directory for Stupa and the two either side villages. So it'll either take off or it won't, but the good thing is that it's very, very inexpensive to run, and it will enable people to create a free listing. And then if they want to upgrade for a tiny amount of money, they can. But we've worked out that even if there's about 1,000, we think, accommodations in the area, between the hotels, the apartments, the villas, the private houses, the rooms. So even if 300 of those upgrade, it'll be worth our while doing it. And I've identified 2 further resorts in the Peloponnese that I think would also are even bigger.
Okay.
So it's a scalable model, and it doesn't depend on me being the front person. No. So that's really nice.
Good.
Yeah.
Got it.
So that's what I've been up to this week, in between earaches.
All right. Now, it sounds as though your who or what is impressed is positive and mine is negative. So shall I go first? Get my little rant out of the way.
Yeah, go on then.
Well, as you know, because I PM'd you earlier, today I'm having my car serviced. And what I like when I have my car serviced is that I stay at home and somebody comes to collect it and somebody brings it back when it's done. And I'm using the same people again today that I used a year ago. But a year ago, I was in Trowbridge. And so they... and a year ago, I was impressed by their incentive loyalty scheme-ish, although they bullied me into it, which I wasn't very pleased about, where you pay £25 in advance, which means they'll remind you about it next year. You'll get incentive pricing for that and other general, nonsense benefits. And it was offered to me as a sort of choice last year, but didn't end up feeling like a choice. I felt like I'd been strong-armed into something. But what was good was when the email came, if I could have booked online, it would have been £66.95p, which is very cheap for a car service because there's an incentive pricing on it, and there's my 25 quid I'd paid in advance. But of course, I've moved house, and the email, I didn't want to book from their email because that would have been Trowbridge, not where I am now. So it meant that I had to involve myself last Saturday in a handful of emails with their kind of Zendesk arrangement. And that meant it had to be handled manually by them and me because there isn't a place where you can log in and change your address when you move house. So when the manual booking confirmation came on Monday, it said it would be £108, and actually it should be 66. So then I replied to that email and say, to bring that issue up, and nobody replied to it. So 24 hours later, I followed it up with one back to the Zendesk, and nobody replied to that either. So it was all about the focus on booking me in and getting my money, but nothing about talking to me about the embarrassing, quote unquote, topic of money. Of course, money is not an embarrassing topic to me. No. So this is going to rear its ugly head later when somebody phones up to say, right, your car needs this, this, and this, and the bill is going to be this, and we won't release it until you've paid that. And I'm going to have to say, but everybody's been ignoring my correspondence all week about the difference between 66 quid and 108, and I paid my £25 loyalty discount nationwide, not branch specific, and I'm not going to pay the £25 today because although I can see the value to them from an accounting, cash flow, and marketing customer loyalty perspective, I can see brilliantly how it works for them. Can't see any value in it for me as a customer who moves house regularly. And I shall be telling them so because it's involved all this manual handling and emails and it isn't resolved yet. And the man came this morning and took the car away, and he was lovely, and he said he would put air in the tyres for me and all that sort of thing. But nobody seems to want to tackle the thorny question of the price with me, keen though they were to get me booked in. So look out later on. Whatever they're called, servicingstop.co.uk.
Yes. This is what's called the UX, the user experience, and could easily have been fixed by them having something written in so that you could go
if I could, yes, exactly. Yeah. If I could just have changed my address, it would be fine. Yes. Now, they've shot themselves in the foot slightly because they've now changed my address, which means that when I press on the button in their original email, it says £66.95. So they've slightly hoist themselves on their own petard. But I don't want to anticipate this is going to go badly. This morning with Jack, he couldn't find me, and then he could find me, and then we had a lovely exchange, and he didn't mind the boot was full of stuff, and he will put air in my tyres, so let's hope. But it's interesting, isn't it? The point I want to make here, word of the week, incentive. If you're offering your punters an incentive, and I can see the value of the incentive, it's got to work. It's got to work for both sides, not just you.
Yes, it's got to. Well, I suppose that well, it would have done if it hadn't been for the address change. So.
Yeah, but people move house, don't they?
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Not as often as me, but I think I imagine quite a lot of people do not live today in the same house they did a year ago.
No, absolutely not. And that's a massive flaw in their system.
It is.
If anyone's got any sense, that Zendesk thing should be escalating it up to the developers.
Well, I think that's not really our job, is it? As long as I get mine for 66 quid today, I'll go away happy.
Well, I'm going to talk about some software that has impressed me.
Oh, good. Is this the one that you...
Yes.
Yes.
Whataboutery, it's called. If anyone's thinking, it's so flexible. You can use it for all sorts of things. It hooks up to Google Maps quite, simply if you know what you're doing. But it also enables you to create different post types. So, for example, I've got accommodation, restaurants and bars, shops. And then it enables you to create a subdirectory within those post types. Anyway, this is a bit boring for anyone listening. But if it would work... This software works for all different kinds of things. So I've been talking to Nelson about a UK-wide directory of grime producers, grime and rap producers and remixers. Be still my beating heart. Yes. And, talking to Phoebe about, directory. But if you recall, back in the midst of time, the first thing that got me excited about internet was a directory of artist managers. Yes, exactly. And it is a beautiful system for matching people up. You have to check there isn't one out there already. But if often if you just put a better spin on it or a more what's the word I'm looking for? A more niche spin on it. And it reminded me of that book, Striking It Rich by Jacqueline Easton, which got me going. It's 33 websites you've probably never heard of that all make more than $1 million a year. They're all directory based, all of them. And most of them don't charge more than $5 a month. And remember that conversation we had where we worked out that it only takes 16,666 $5 a month to make $1 million a year. So if you're listening, listener, and you've got an idea for a directory website, come and talk to me, because Directory software, which is unbelievably cheap. It's free, a plugin for WordPress, but then you get to upgrade it with a series of plugins. And I went for the whole package, and it cost me about $200. And my investor could not believe his ears when he realised that you could make a quick to
directory
market
site,
a directory site that could be scalable globally on any resort that's got an active Facebook group, on a bit of software that costs $200.
Or, to be honest with you, any topic that lends itself to a directory site.
Yes, exactly. It could be a directory of knitters and weavers or whatever. You know. It could be anything. But as long as it requires some sort of geographic location. And we nearly came to a grinding halt yesterday, because I thought, he said, the address line. I said, there's a problem there, because nobody in Stupa's got addresses. And he went a bit quiet, and I said, this could be the hidden issue, couldn't it? And he said, I can't think of a way around this, because unless you put an address line in, it doesn't show where you are on the map. I said, so what's this stick a pin in the map thing then? He said, yes, they could stick a pin where they are. Yeah. And so we got around it. Okay. So again, the software worked marvellously.
Do you know what? I've been thinking, since you mentioned it about a month ago, so many things would be great if they could interface with that.
3 words.
Yes.
That's a very good idea.
This morning, twice this week, Ocado couldn't find me, first man in a month, and Jack struggled to find me this morning, or for me to talk him down. But if I could have given him that 3 words, so
what 3 words?
Yes, things like that should cross-reference whatever the word is.
Well, they might do.
They will do soon.
They've got an open API. They could be integrated.
They will do soon. Yeah.
Right. I'm going to investigate that, because that would be absolutely brilliant for Stupa.
I know.
Because sometimes people haven't got a mobile phone that shows Google Maps.
No. What a brilliant genius idea, Judith.
Yes. Yeah. So it's very exciting. So I highly recommend this software. And if you want to know who my developer is, then just get in contact and I'll let you know.
Okay. Roger.
All right then. That's us done.
It is.
Good. Let's go.
All right. See you next week. Yeah.
Bye.
It's a brand new day.
You've been listening to Nicola Cairncross and Judith Morgan. Do come and visit us at ownitthepodcast.com. We love to hear your feedback. You can find out more about Judith and visit her on her website at judithmorgan.com, and you can find Nicola at nicolacairncross.com.